Okay, there comes a moment in time, a moment in history and revolution when the cosmos basically is kicking ass. And yeah, we're in time of kicking ass right now, but the focus of this kick ass program are Dr. R. Michael Fisher. I'm here to talk about what I see as the high point and the now turning perhaps low point, but ready to turn another high point in the cycle of, let's just call it the manosphere, the role, the nature, and the evolution of masculinity, i.e., men, boys, and where that's all going to go. And so I'm going to give some big picture from my experience and why this got kicked off. To talk about this is because I don't talk about gender, generally, sexuality, etc., because I found it a huge rabbit hole, to say the least, to get into. And I'm not always sure whether it's worth going in. I have other things to do and talk about and do research on and share educationally. So, and therapeutically. So, whatever is going on now, I can't avoid it. The universe is kicking me pretty hard. I'm going to go through a couple experiences I've had, probably two or three major and very painful experiences in a certain way, just also enlightening, but also are leading to collapses of relationships in quite a deadly way. And I'm talking about some close and potentially really good relationships that have just gone what we call sideways, is one way to put it, which means not a good direction. Gone. Delete. And that has impacted me so much. I just feel like I really have to talk about it, not just to get some of my emotions out. And that's not the whole point of this video, to play victim or anything like that. It's to really try to arc out what are those representing to you, Michael? What are they hitting? And maybe this will be useful for some others. Um, oh, that's kind of similar to something I experienced. So that's the kind of video that is today. I'm glad to be sharing this with you. I'm probably going to walk through fairly slowly just so I don't rush it. And you can watch this obviously in your own time and your own pleasure or not. Okay, so well, where to start? I really even don't even know, other than to say I woke up this morning. Sounds like a song. And in that hypnagogic state, which is actually before I go to bed, but it's the hypnopompic state where I like as well because they're liminal states in between normal reality. And it's the waking up after the end of the night. So I think it's like 3 or 4 in the morning. I get up and I've got this huge bright light going off, and it's saying, "This is your explanation, Michael, for what just happened to you with your therapist that you just hired for the last couple of months. You've had one session, and this flashing light is going on, in this hypnopompic state where I have some of my most brilliant thoughts. As far as I'm concerned, yeah, you can decide for yourself. And I often write them down, and then I often publish on some of those insights. So I'm a philosopher, thinker, educator, also been a therapist, counselor, guide, still am, mentor, still am, teaching in higher education, still am, in visionary practice leadership. So a lot of background I have on a lot of different things, but I'm definitely interested in the human condition and what's happening, and historically and evolutionarily consciousness itself is going through, what is going on. And I'm going to present today a case, which I will do a little dramatically after I do the intro, um, for what I'm calling red pill 3.0, or red pilling 3.0, which is I'm going to demonstrate what it means to do red pilling 3.0. If you're not sure what red pilling is, I'll just say it's got to do with the men's movement, the manosphere. And again, that will all come out as I talk, and I won't try to explain red pilling until I get into the full performative drama and hopefully transperformative drama of what that could look like. And I'm offering this as to anybody, but obviously to boys and men, that we have a time when we can take some new choices for our liberation and the liberation of the best of humanity, the best of what can happen with our non-human relations as well. 3.0 coming up, Red Pill 3.0. Okay, well, let's go back and tangle to just say what qualifies me to talk about men other than I'm a man, I've been a man for a long time. All my life, 74 years old, been through a lot of social movements, been always involved as an activist in various ways, always interested in the transformation of human consciousness. A spiritual life, you could call it, a philosophical life, an educational life, and a practical life. I'm a father, so I have two daughters, and those are important. And now a grandson, that's important. They're 17. What are they going to do in the world? I'm looking at his future. You bet. And that just being symbolic of all the others in the younger generations that I care a lot about. And what I care about is the rebel energy. I've written about this. I'll be writing more about it. This goes way back, almost 40 years of being very interested in the rebel, its good side, hidden side, and its dark side, and the more pathological turns of the rebel psychology. So won't go into that. This is not what this is going to be about. This view, this video, I'll maybe hint on it a few more times. And if you ask me more, make your comments, questions in the comments below, and we'll get to it. Also, that film, The Manosphere, I'll put something below that you can link on and watch that documentary. Apparently, it's on Netflix, just came out by Louis Theroux, I believe, is a journalist and did a really interesting job going in and interviewing the new men's movements, or what's one of them is called red pilling men movement. Okay, that intro, let's get back. My own background I've given you, and so I've experienced what it's like to be a male, white male, raising two girls in this last few decades. They were born in the early 80s, and I've certainly learned what culture will do and grab on to them. I've watched it and I've not been happy about it because, for the most part, it's a blue pill culture. That referencing of blue pill, red pill, again, will slowly slip out in this talk. If you stay with me, where I will get very detailed because I did my doctoral dissertation on red pill, blue pill, and its potential for true revolution and twisted revolutions. Get back to that in a moment. It comes, that metaphor from the Matrix film trilogy, now a quaternary, four films, sci-fi fiction by the Wachowski, used to be brothers, now it's the Wachowski sisters. Very controversial film, started in 1999, first release, on and on. I did my dissertation at 2003, just before the second of that series of sci-fi films was released. And I got my dissertation. I actually got it. They put me through. I was a miserable rebel for them in that institute, the University of British Columbia, Faculty of Education. Okay. So going back, I am a male, as I said, obviously presenting as, but biologically determined as, but that means nothing or only relatively important. It's what the culture does in meaning making around that sexuality, that sex that I have on my birth certificate, M for male. Well, that is a very controversial, as you know, it's got to do with identity politics today, it's got to do with culture wars today, and then we'll come up to the issue of I'm also a trans. And that is a huge part of culture wars, what is now slightly taken a variant, but a very powerful one, of wokeism and anti wokeism at war, tearing our countries apart, especially if you live in North America, especially if you live in the United States. Under the current regime of power in the White House, etc., that is all like a firing rod. It isn't a lightning rod, it's probably better to say. It is the sword that's burning, that is cutting our societies and is really asking us to transform at a higher cosmic level, is what I'm basically saying. But in the meantime, it's causing a lot of harm, a lot of bloodshed, a lot of abuse. And so let's not get into hacking and whacking at the current Trump regime, but it's a Trumpocracy that is probably destroying democracy. And of course, democracy was never perfect in the first place. But I'm going to get back to the democratic right that I have as a human citizen under the Code of the Human Act of Human Rights, in universal human rights. And I have a right to be my male self and change my male self if I please to, and if it's obviously not hurting anyone else. Then it gets into all the controversies of the trans debate, let's just call it that now, or trans wars. Not going to go into all that in detail, but it is part of me talking about the manosphere and what's happening. And it is, for the most part, as I use manosphere, it is pretty anti-trans anything. In other words, the manosphere is trying to get back to, well, let's get back to the good old man ways. The good old when we knew a man was a man, we knew a woman was a woman, and we each had our place. Yeah. Sorry, everybody. Sorry that evolution and society's changes are going into such complexity, which they are, and creating a lot of confusion, which they are. I feel for people who are struggling with wanting to get back to the good old ways. I see it in education. I'm an educator as well. Of course, I see them, let's get back to the basics. Don't teach that stuff in schools. This is all because there's a great fear of the complexity and the confusion that goes with it because we don't have really good roadmaps. That's why, guys, men, anybody, trans, whoever wants to watch this, I'm going to be treading through and getting this XY chromosome thing sorted out a little bit, but we got a problem. We've got a real serious problem in male identity, masculine identity. So I grew up, as I said, in this particular costume. I love it, and I don't love it, both. So I have a little bit of both love and hate, if you will. Well, what it means to grow up and be a man, what it means to grow up and be a father. I'll tell you, I had a ton of pressure on what it meant to be a father. And I'm a very rebellious thinker. I like to be, have my own autonomy in thinking, but I also care about the commune. I care about nature. I care about what we're doing to the whole planet. But oh man, the oppression is huge on the pressure to be this conforming male father figure. My divorce with my first wife should have been a great marriage for a lot of reasons. Quite frankly, I think was destroyed in part, a lot of part, because I was a rebel male. I didn't want to conform completely. I come out of the 60s and 70s. Are you kidding me? We were changing the world. So I grew up in that. I cut my teeth in that. I am part of that movement. And that was because we weren't happy with the standard normalized roles for everything and everybody and what it looked like to have a job and be a proper father and be properly responsible. I have a human right to work my way in the cosmos, as do you. Again, as long as we are not, for the most part, harming others, which is virtually impossible. A great ethic. I'm just studying Jainism right now on do no harm. Yeah, okay, like that's very purified. And yeah, I think worth looking at as a ethic for living. Eastern philosophies appeal to me that way. But The reality is we're always causing harm. We're always predatory on something because we eat other creatures, for one. Okay, and humans kill a lot of humans. And we're all part of it in some way. We're all part of hurting. So if you're part of being a male, if you're part of being a female in this world, you're hurting others because of that position. You represent and act out those patterns. You're conditioned from culture. Socialization makes you a certain kind of male, and you think that's the best, or you don't think it's the best. And that's what the 60s and 70s was for me. It wasn't the best. So off I went on my own journey. And so my gender, which is the cultural side of sex that you're born with, physically and bodily, physiologically, I moved away at probably in my early 40s to the 50s, particularly. I claimed myself, I said, I'm no longer a male. Oh, what does that mean? I'm no longer a full male that the society wants that I live in, which is a very patriarchally oriented society. And I therefore found my autonomy, some freedom, some creativity to move toward what I called a 51 presenting male percent and 49 female percent. And eventually that flipped where I said, no, I'm really more a 51% female and 49% male. See the shift? Subtle. Who would notice it on the surface? Not probably anybody. They might. They might think I'm a bit of a femme male generally, but I'm really not. And I really don't even want to be. That's not me. It might be for others who are in these transitions. So I was a trans male. I was more female, quote, more feminine, quote, than male, masculine. And that lasted for quite a long time. And eventually, probably 10 years later after that, and after watching the Matrix movie and doing my dissertation on it, and other kinds of forces just kept saying, wow, I want to even be more a radical feminist. And I want to be more female, i.e., feminine, to the point where I got up to 60% and 40% male. So those are designations. And again, I'm not saying that designation of that transitioning says that I'm not a male in body. I'm not getting rid of my sex as a man. And some people want to. Some people want to take it that radical. I thought it was pretty radical to be claiming that I was 60% because I didn't look that way. And it was really hard that sometimes I would speak about it at a talk or write about it, and people would go, wow, you just look like a regular guy. Well, sort of. But inside my soul, inside of my intellect, inside of my ideas, my internal life, and I'm quite an introverted person. I think about these things a lot. I contemplate a lot. I practice practices of recovering and healing and liberating myself from the opposing and the oppressing and the barriers to being a free human being. And that's what our human rights, Universal Human Rights Act legislation is all about, being a free human being. All creatures on this planet want to be free, I guarantee you. Okay, I can't prove it, but they do. Intuition, they call it. That's my intuition. So I'm very intuitive that way, and I'm an INFJ if you want to know on the Myers-Briggs scale. A rare soul, rare person, rare personality type, and all that kind of thing. But yes. So what happened in the last few years, I've been shifting back. And I went, oh, I'm ready now. Done that work to be a radical feminist. Still will always be a radical feminist, whatever that means, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then I moved back to claiming in the last couple of years that, and I told my wife, told my children, I'm moving back to being a male more. So I'm now 51% male and 49% female. I shifted. And that was probably the first symptom that basically was telling me, okay, you're going to have to pay attention now to gender, sex wars, culture wars, Michael, the politics of identity around sexuality and gender, but also around just what's happening in the wokeism and the anti-wokeism communities, the trans problem, as we call it, the trans challenge. And I'm transdisciplinary. I like to gather knowledge for all disciplines. So just so that you know that, I have a trans positive attitude, disposition to knowledge, truth, reality, and health and sanity and sustainability for this planet. Okay, a lot of words. Take a drink. Yeah, I will. The high point was I was involved in a lot of conscious community growing up in my late 20s, 30s, and worked in men's groups. I was part of the men's movement that was coming out of the 80s. And it was huge. It was a huge movement to help men find their identities, to help them go through initiations, yeah, a little more proper, at least in this modern industrial society, a little bit better than what traditional societies, pre-industrial, etc., have all known how to do, and help males be raised so that they know their identity and feel good in their identity, yet have some freedom in their identity, but also stay very connected to the communal responsibility for the earth, for nature, for the god, for the goddess, whatever the belief system was. But it was never perfect. There's always slips. There's always times when certain males, for various reasons, born male, evolved, changed, the world was changing, and they couldn't fit into the society anymore. And that's me. I don't fit into this society very well at all. And I still don't. But that doesn't mean I can't function in it in a relatively sane way, which I'm attempting to do. You can make your judgments of both my work and my legacy, my life. But I've also got, a couple daughters right now, and, who are not very happy with me and parts of me, and I'm not very happy with them and parts of them. Well, okay, so we have a father daughter cross generational conflict, and it's not resolvable right now. And we've worked on it. I've had a good relationship with them generally for a long time, and it started to dissolve as they got into their 40s, mid 40s now. But going back to the high point, I said the men's movement that I was for various years. And then I started going to a few men's groups later on, like a couple decades later, and it's like, oh boy, this is not a very healthy men's movement. And if this wasn't the most radical at that time. So what I'm basically saying is the men's movements from the 80s forward, I watched over a 40-year period roughly, and I watched them kind of get, to me, more and more twisted. So I feel like I have a good reference in what I thought was a pretty good men's movement for the most part. There's always some strange stuff or even pathological stuff for sure. But I felt like it was pretty grounded and solid in my understanding of what I was involved in. And then it started to become a little weirder, as I say, 20 years down the road from that. And then to me, once you got in past kind of 9/11 new millennium, um, males and the parts of culture, it's kind of after 9/11 and the crisis that caused a huge post-traumatic reactions, and people are starting to become more and more polarized. And then the men's movement started splitting and more. It was always some splits, ideological splits of what it means to be a man, what's a true man, and so like all that stuff. And it split like crazy. And after COVID, even more radicalization. So where are we going to find, that's what this video is about, where are we going to find some stability or possible core for a red pilling male masculinity that's going down a better road, in my opinion? Again, this is all my views and my experience, and some reading and research, but I'm not an expert in the field of gender and sexuality. Well, the core started coming from seeing this radicalization with online learning and takeover of the culture, digital culture. and technoculture and the incredible demands that that put on men, boys, males, and really just really whacked at them with so many alternatives and so many different voices of what we now call influencers online. And they're now having huge conditioning, if not cultish for sure, in many ways. And men, boys are hurting and they're not sure where to take that hurt. And in the most cases, they follow these influencers. So I'm going to talk more about that in regarding what is being now called the Manosphere, which is this documentary that was done, which I highly recommend. I have not seen it myself, but I've seen clips of it and I've heard some people talking about it who I respect, like an anthropologist, a woman, who gave a pretty interesting analysis of that film. So you can look and do that research on your own, see what you think of the Manosphere and its branch called the red pilling men's branch of that manosphere. Trying to get men back with their power and dignity is what it's about. Overall, all the branches have that same goal. Something's being lost and they don't like it, is another way to put it. The core, I would suggest for red pilling today, 3.0, is that the third version is a chapter I wrote in this really interesting book, which I think was at the height of the good side of this male movement within a good dialogue with the women's movement. That includes feminists and womanists, etc., trans community. So this is an integral book on, you can see, sex, gender, and sexuality, and critical inquiries from an integral perspective. Integral means a lot to me. It's an integral philosophy and integral theory. And that, I think, is what we need today to get back to a healthy 3.0 red pilling movement. And in general, a healthier, saner, sustainable, less violent culture wars, gender wars. Holding that there, I'm a little attracted to this book for a couple of reasons. One is one of the editors, my daughter, my youngest daughter. I introduced her to integral theory when she was 18, and she took off with it, went on various directions from it, and I'll leave that story for her. You can interview her if you want. And then there's this art piece, which is my wife's. So our family, and I have a chapter in there, as does my daughter, and as do I. There's my chapter. Quite the title, huh? Are Men Tragically Hopeless? A Critical Integralist Perspective. I talk about what happens in my own journey on male masculinity, and I talk about it from an integral perspective, not political correctness or political identity, culture wars perspective. I acknowledge those. I acknowledge those battles. I acknowledge what men are doing, boys, trans, the whole world of the manosphere. I appreciate its struggle. I appreciate it fighting for what is right, just as I had to fight for what was right for me as a boy growing into a man. And then moving through whatever cycles I have gone. And you can see I kind of went far and then I came back. So I'm all for the male journey, if you want to call it that, boys' journey, teens, adults, older, and the old, like me, getting there. Um, we can keep changing, folks. We can keep evolving and learning and growing. The question will be is how violent are we going to be in all that growing? And that gets really touchy when you start looking at what's going on in the world and how many males are leading these wars. Not all males, but it's a lot in the movement toward fascism that's very attractive to mostly males, not only, yeah. There's problems with power, right? So in a way, this whole video is about male power, masculine power. And I'm not going to come out with some simple, stereotypic Jungian perspective or something that, wow, we're both masculine and we're both feminine. And there's some truth to that, but it's like way, way over simplified. And it doesn't bring in the complexities of what I'm talking about today. Let's not get into that. Let's move on. Let's get to I'm asking, do some research, rereading. That book came out 2021. Maybe it's further back. 2014. A really highly beautiful essays by males, trans, and females, etc. And really good stuff. So to me, it was kind of the peak of good thinking on this topic. So now for red pilling 3, I'm going to dive in. Symbolic. Red pill. That's the sign. Put it on. Try it out. This is what the new males, 3.0 red pill males, ought to be wearing, ought to be doing symbolically. I wish it was redder, but it sort of is. Orange, yellow. But we all know what that means. Wear one of these and you know what it means. It means you want attention. You want more attention than you've been getting. So that's my theory. Let's get the boys wearing more of these, like from the beginning. Teenagers, adults, elders, all the way up. You can see it's sure I'm making a joke, I'm performing, but it's like it's real. Like we need to get red pilled. We need to catch attention in a new way. And so let me give the story very quickly of the Matrix film where this metaphor came of what it means to be red pilled or end up blue pilled. Well, it's got to do with Neo, who was the male hero of that first film and all the films, accompanied by Trinity, by the way, as the partnering, the female body, woman, and Neo and Trinity play together and with a trio with Morpheus, and he was a black American type male, very masculine. Neo was not fully masculine. He was a geeky computer guy hacker. Trinity, very feminine, butchy even, slightly masculine. So the Wachowski brothers, being trans themselves, pull out tons of these characters in their films. And that's why I think it's a very postmodern film, if not postmodern. It actually is so much about the reality of the future of where we're going in a machine world. That's a whole other story. You can do your research on that. Many of you already may know lots about it. I've actually done a video on the Matrix, which is also on my channel here. You can search that up. I'll put a link to it. The idea was at one point, Trinity goes because she's partnered up with Morpheus. Morpheus was freeing people from the Matrix, the machine world. He was a visionary prophetic leader. He also knew how to rescue people from the machines, people that had been turned into basically a cyborg individual living in a illusory world that looked real, like the human world used to look. But the world itself had gone through great crisis collapse and was very much run by machines. Sound familiar to today? This is 1999. A prediction, that film. Very deep prediction of where we're going. What will happen when AI rules, more or less. But these are the rebels. These are the operating on a different set of values, but they also are cyborgs because they've been freed. But some of them are true humans that they're also relating to. That gets a complex narrative, but it's all in there. Trinity and Neo get together. Neo is the star of the movie in the way, but I actually think Trinity is the star of the movie trilogy, quaternity. And basically, Neo has to find what it means to be a male with purpose beyond being this geeky kind of bit femme male. Yeah, he was a loner. You could say many other things about his character before he transforms. Before he transforms in front of Morpheus in a very powerful scene where the male, big, huge, tough, broad male, Morpheus, leader of the rebels, initiates Neo to become a new man. Neo means new man, apparently. So um, that whole, it's really new human, but he's in a male body. So that's what we get to watch in the whole character. And that's why this film is so attractive to males, young males. Not that they understood everything going on, but they liked it. He was a male hero again, in a way. And the more subtle reading, which I'm asking the Red Pill 3.0 people, follow and read much more carefully what that film's about. You can read my work if you want, talk to me. There may be some others out there who really understand the Matrix way deeper than most popular culture does. So, the popular version of this red pilling, which was a term created not maybe a couple of decades ago or less, probably, of this radicalization of males online, liking that image of, are you going to take the blue pill or the red pill? Morpheus hands the option to Neo after he explains a bit to Neo about how the world is so effed up. Trinity's not in the room, but she was the one that brought Neo to Morpheus. She is really the guide. She's waiting for him, hopefully, to come out the other side because he took the red pill, not the blue pill. Get it? Okay, so the red pill takes them into another journey, and that will actually be a journey of end battle, very complicated, of what his freedom will be for him and how he will go out, and he does take the red pill, yeah. And on the surface, he's going out now to kick ass. And that's where the young, lonely males sitting in their homes, stuck on the computer, or just geeking out on social media, don't feel they belong in the world, don't see a purpose, right? They really lost their myth. This creates a myth, that story. And it's not unlike the myth of the other males who are lone guys, find, the passion, Batman or others. I don't follow all that world of the new popular culture mythologies, commercialized, unfortunately, and infiltrate the males in our culture in the last 30, 40 years. So then young men see these guys going out and the blasting and the killing and the machine guns, and there's lots of characters. Horror movies, a lot of them. I don't watch that, and I'm not in that world, but I know enough that they're there, the Rambos, etc. So basically, that's what red pilling is. Now you can go out and kick ass, become a real man. Well, that's what red pilling 2.0, right? So 1.0 is what actually went on in the Matrix mythology, that narrative, that film. A very brilliant, powerful story. I did my dissertation on it for a reason. I also varied that narrative to something more critical and integral. Won't get into that. You can read my dissertation, which you probably won't. But if you want to talk to me about it, I'm glad to talk to you about it. So the 2.0 was the radicalization online of these younger generations coming to see that image. It went kind of viral, right? Like a meme, as they call it. There's a red pill meme. and it spread across, and a lot of males lapped onto it. These influencer males who are the people like Jordan B. Peterson. He is the biggest and was. Maybe there's a lot others were around with Jordan Peterson. There were some, but he's the one that just got super popular with the young males, primarily, not only, but primarily, 89% or more. And they loved his basically, clean your room, be this, grow up, quit snarling around and weeping around, sitting in your room, get out there and do something for the community. Go help an old lady across the street. He's a bit of the new Boy Scout leader type, but he was super hyped on his attack on woke culture, on transgender, on XYZ, any things that were more progressive. He went after all that. And he's a Christian, okay? He comes out of Christian, more or less fundamentalist, Pentecostalist, Pentecostal, fundamentalist type religions in Alberta. I'm an Albertan. He was born and raised a couple hours north of me. I know what that crowd and that community, that rural community is like. And that's where he comes from. That's his roots. And yes, he's very bright. He's all these things, became a PhD in psychology, professor, of Toronto, and then got kicked out more or less. And then he got kicked out of the Psychological Association, professional licensing board, because his actions online in that community, he was just too wild and irrespective uh, to a lot of people. He was calling people all kinds of names and very derogatory, and that's why the online crowd loved him. He was this new kick-ass Neo. He was Neo point 2, 2.0 really. But he's also part of the Andrew Tate and the other crowd, all of the Manosphere. That was really the taking off point in my mind. But as I say, way back in the men's movement in the 80s, there were also some of that in the Christian right and others that thought this was what a male should be, and let's get back to being, the proper husband and the proper stereotypic role of what men were like in the 50s, 60s, not 60s, but the 50s and 40s and 30s and so on. Getting back, right? Some people call that retro regressive movement to try and find stability in the kind of chaos of fast changing in the world, which is very complex now. And that's what this whole video today is really, it's about the people who are fighting order against chaos, and chaos is fighting against that order, rebelling against it, and the order is trying to take over the chaos. In integral theory, which you've seen integral show up in my essay in that book, I've talked about it in my dissertation. I use an integral perspective, which is also based on spiral dynamics theory. So you can also look that up, and I'll put a link, because it does a good meme analysis on a universal big evolutionary picture of how memes evolve. And won't go into that theory because it's very complex, but it has something that's called red meme. So it goes through and labels the memes. And these colors were sort of labeled by the original theorists of this, and very serious theorists, Claire Graves, for example, the psychological theorist, back early 40s, 50s. And this theory, spiral dynamics, has evolved since then, mixed with some of the Ken Wilber's integral philosophy and theory, and a whole other set of syntheses that are very powerful and potent. I still think they're worth a lot of analytic power today. But this red meme is one of the earlier memes that really, to me, I see it so represents this red pilling 2.0 that these radicalized males took over. Well, I just had a therapist I was working with, integral therapist, so called, and just trying to work with them in the first session. We were collaborating, we were trying to do something experimental. They were very into it, this male, and young male, so definitely a millennial. And I thought this would be really cool working, and I thought, okay, I'm going to pay him. Let's do it. He was interested. And it just turned out to go completely sideways. And I realized this morning in my state a pumped state of clarity. And I've been doing a lot of writing in this last few days since I got dumped by my therapist. The guy dumped me. When we were working collaboratively, no discussion, no pre-warning it was coming, and we only did one session. And then they write this 3-page letter that they are analyzing me and saying, this is all my problems, and I will hope you well. And he signs it off with a heart, basically saying, don't ever come to me for therapy. And basically, he felt I was manipulating him. It's all in the letter. It's an unbelievable letter for a therapist to write a client who's a paying client. You're supposed to be compassionate. You're supposed to listen. In one session, what do you learn about a person who's 74 years old? I mean, it just told me, wow, Mike Ayala, this guy's like red pilled. He's red pilled. He's one of these new males. He couldn't stand that I didn't put family at the core of my first values when we had our first session talking. And, he's saying a few things. And I said, well, this is, family I put in a particular position, and that includes my daughters. And if there's conflict, sure. It doesn't mean I don't love them. It just means that, that's not my priority, and that's maybe not their priority. And basically he just couldn't believe it. And in the letter, it comes out again that he can't believe. So I was critiquing him a few times here and there, just really mildly, but saying, yeah, you're really not following our agreement of what we were going to be doing and collaborating. And then he dumps me and basically says, I'm trying to tear him apart. I'm trying to rip him apart. And he thinks he's being manipulated. But bottom line, he couldn't stand my value system, because he comes back in the letter and says, well, because you're not talking to your daughters right now, there's obviously you're stuck, your problem. I never went into the theory, this therapy session, when we first talked, and it was 2 months ago. I went in and never said I'm stuck. I said, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to explore in this point in my life, and it would be really good to do it with you. You're an integral theorist, you're this, and you're this, and you're a young male. And all the details, but it's like, wow, that's exactly what happened. He's got to be, this is my hypothesis, he's been red pilled. He's back to the male role. He's got a family and kids and so on. He's just starting his life in that direction. And I went, that's right. That's why he cannot handle. He cannot cooperate and listen and just be with my value system. You don't have to agree with it. Therapists don't always agree with their clients' value system, but he was definitely disregarding and not listening and valuing, judging my position on family, my hierarchy of values, my right, my human right to be and enact myself. And yes, I want to do healing work in these sessions, but I got to build trust with the person. The person's got to hook up with me in a trustful way. This was just so betraying as a therapist. I mean, guy's supervisor, if I ever made a formal complaint, would rake this guy through the coals, if not fire him. It is so unethical practice. I was red pill 2.0. So no doubt a millennial, as a young male boy, he was listening to the Jordan Petersons. I don't know how far he went, but anti-feminist, and I'm a radical feminist, right? So he picked it up. He got enough, and I wasn't sure. I didn't know him that well, so I'm just like picking up. But that's my guess. Get back to the manosphere, because these red pillars now, the 2.0s, have become also associated with and being criticized as misogynist, right? Which is anti-women, anti-females, put women down, put them in their place. And as I listened to a talk on the Manosphere documentary, which did an interview of a lot of the different sects or groups, right? The division groups, and they don't all agree with each other on some things, but they agree in general that men should be on top. And that's, as you know, in the Bible and so on. So patriarchy is here, misogyny, the hate of women, as it's called, or at least the domination over women, is essential to male role identity. And the Proud Boys, so you may have heard of the Proud Boys, they're part of this manosphere, and all part of the right wing, but there's some of that in the left wing of politics as well. Okay, 2.0. Now back to 3.0. and I'll end the video. What do I want to say? We want attention. 3.0 is you put on this signal, cautioning, danger. I use it for riding my bike, which is a good thing for a male to do, rather than cars and motorcycles and all the big toys and the gas guzzlers and oil guzzlers. Yeah, I'm judgmental about that. I'm an environmentalist. I was since I was 18 years old. I'm not giving up on climate crisis that we're in, a world that is deteriorating ecologically, species going extinct. I'm not ignoring that, and I'm not giving up on it. Nobody's going to convince me that that's old hat. But that's what the new manosphere is more or less doing. They don't talk or care about the environment. Not good, folks. That's very retro-regressive. And it's not even accurate. It's just basically denial and sad woundedness that they don't see they're going to get a lot of bonuses to their masculinity by following the eco movements and activism. That just doesn't boost their male self-esteem, is another way to say it. And they're probably right in a certain way, it doesn't. Not like the more heroic, right? The neo go kick ass type male. And let's go dominate some women sexually and intellectually and power wise. Women are getting too heady. They're too ahead, too much power. So males are just going for power. And that's when they pull out the guns and money. The Jeffrey Epstein, facade, facility, crazy fascist takeover of women and girls, that he was a ringleader internationally. And now we're seeing all kinds of leaders, including some in government, obviously, and some in the spiritual new age human potential wellness community, like Deepak Chopra, trapped and involved some way, supporting, at least not diminishing, that movement, which was males to take over females and girls and own them as slaves. That's Epstein in a nutshell. You can look at it many directions, but it basically is the enslavement of and marketing of and trade of humans under the control of men. So that was another crisis that has brought me to do this film of late, the release of those Epstein files. And it just to go with the Manosphere film coming out, I had to talk about 3.0. This is very different than domination, isn't it? What it is saying, I'm going to own my vulnerability as a male. I'm going to get attention as a male, which I deserve, because, yeah, males are not always getting good attention. I didn't get good male attention all the way up. And I certainly didn't get it in university because I was an old white male. And that was really out and down at the bottom of the pyramid in feminist, people of colors going to the top, women in universities. Culture still there. So it's been hard. It's very painful as a male, very fearful. It's terrifying to lose status in a society or culture. But it happens. It happens throughout cultures. So we got to get through this. And I'm just saying, yes, Neo in the film was a good red pilling 101, 1.0, but accompanied by a very powerful woman to keep him in community and in balance. Thank you, Trinity, and that archetype. And this we have to do again. Males need women very powerfully, but they need them not just to be subordinate. And Trinity was not subordinate, I can guarantee you, in that film. So watch it. Watch those films. You'll see her role. And then, as I say now, is coming to, I think, something quite different that I can't say a lot about, and I can only point it as an edge of evolution for males, is get the attention, show that we have to be treated with respect, we're sensitive, but also that we're incredibly powerful in that sensitivity. And we're powerful because we know the way men operate at some level. We know the male psychology at some level. And of course, there's all kinds of diversity, just like there is in the manosphere. But I will speak for myself now as I end. I know the male world, so females, males, trans, check with me on what I know. Oh, you got some wisdom about males? Yeah, I do. I've been on both sides, more or less. Not as much as some males who transition to females or females back to males, etc. Yeah, I mean, this is a community dialogue we need to be having. And what I find is people aren't curious. They don't ask me anything about it. And I'm a teacher out there, I'm in public. It's like taboo. So this is basically saying, okay, I'm going to put this on to acknowledge taboo. I could have wrote taboo here, taboo here. But then I also could have put tape on here. And I was thinking this morning, part of my performance, and then I'd rip the masking tape off this to show these are my wounds. Do you want to see them? I'm going to rip them open anyway. That's what masculine Manosphere 2.0 red pilling has turned into an abusive, distorted, unfortunately, view of red pill 1.0. They've distorted it, twisted it. It is not what is in that film narrative or the myth of red pill, blue pill, which is, I think, a great metaphor for liberation. And they've turned it into this twisted form. And so I call that in my theory the twisted rebel. And it's not the essential rebel. That's what we're trying to recover. That's what Neo and Trinity and Morpheus represent in their battle against the great forces of the machine world, which was really the oppressive patriarchal world gone machinic and gone corporate nowadays, is what we would call it, with what's called, the boys club, the boys world, the bro billionaires, etc. That's what we're in. Yeah, we're being led by bro billionaires to trillionaires, and a very few of them. And they're controlling social media and media of all kinds. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. So that's where we're going to go now, guys, if I may say that. 3.0, red pilling. We have to correct that 2.0 without putting it down. That's what an integralist does. You don't put it down and say it's all bad. It isn't. There's no way. Let's be good, therapeutically sound, and treat them with respect for the work they're trying to do. And they're trying all their strategies. And we're going to have to ask them and continually to try and support them to move in another direction. But we got to find new models for that. We've got to try new stories. We're going to have to give them the attention that they deserve. And same with me, I'm putting it on this morning and I went, that's the perfect metaphor for me in my world. And maybe people will ask questions, why are you wearing that? you know, well, when I'm on my bike riding, yeah, obviously for visibility. So I don't get smashed over by cars and people driving on their cell phones and not looking, which is very easy to happen these days. Machine world, people are cyborgs, not paying attention. They kill people like me, bike riders. I bike ride all my life. I don't want a car. I don't need a car. But that's all just symbolic in a way, too. It's the psychological and spiritual development. It's the philosophical development. I don't like spiritual, that's fine. Just use your secular, that's fine. That's what you want. But it's maturity. It's a mature male. Red pilling 3.0. Put it on. Carry it. Let's learn from it. And as I say, big question mark. I don't know where it's going to all go and how this is going to look. I can give you some ideas, but I haven't worked it all out. Answers. Can't bring back the stability that we used to have. No way. The world's way too complex for that kind of stability, guys. We're not going to get it. We got to find a different existential capacity and potent way of finding power. And in the end, we have to find what I argue in my work for the last 35 years is the path of fearlessness is there for us, which is what red pilling was always about from the start to where it ought to go now and into the future. There probably will be a red pilling for males, but maybe for females too. I think so. I think it doesn't matter what your sex, what your gender. This is fundamental human growth and development for maturity. Thanks very much for today.